My kids were like, I need a jacket. And I'm like, I know, right? It's so nice. It's cold. Tomorrow even colder and then it gets warm again, but I'll take it. It's like 68 tomorrow. That sounds so nice to me. I'm ready. It feels like fall, just a little bit. Halloween's 2 weeks from tomorrow, which is crazy. Does anyone do anything fun for Halloween? Anyone dress up?
I don't know what I'm doing yet. It's
No?
like kind of initiate those conversations. It's
Yeah.
my friend's birthday on Halloween,
Okay.
so
We have a soccer practice the day before Halloween and we decided we'd all dress up in our costumes for soccer practice. I'm gonna be, I have like an old inflatable dinosaur costume and I can't wait to try and dribble in it. Like, that's gonna be hilarious. So,
oh,
yeah.
you're the one that wears that.
Yeah, I tried to trick or treat in it last year with my kids and it was like, I felt like I spent the whole time just shuffling, right? Like halfway through the night, I was like, forget it, like. That's all. But otherwise, I think this year we're doing 80s, like our whole family is doing like an 80s theme. I'm not sure why. Somebody decided and we all ran with it. But for soccer practice, dino costumes. I'm excited for that. That'll be interesting. I think I see you, I don't see you on Halloween's a Thursday, right? So it's 2 weeks from tomorrow. But I'll see you the day before Halloween. I'll have to bring some candy or something. I wrote a couple of reminders up here. I'll talk about them at the end, but I just want to make sure that they are on your mind since one's today and then one is coming up next week. Then again, I'll talk about those at the end, but just to make sure that you're thinking about them as you're sitting there staring this direction. Otherwise, what we'll do today is we'll finish up with eating disorders. So we have the treatments to talk about. And then I have a little case study that we're gonna do about a young girl struggling with an eating disorder, and that'll kind of help us to bring it all together. And then we'll move into substance disorders, which will start and then finish up next week. So that is kind of our plan. Hard to believe that like October is starting to wind down. There's like 2 weeks left in October and then it's November. I've been thinking about November a lot because I have a cruise in November and it's like 39 days or 40 days and I'm starting to get excited. I had to check in for it yesterday and I was.
It's like Christmas.
I know. It's coming so fast. We went into Lowe's and like everything was Christmas. I was like, no, don't look. Like, I hate that. I hate that they're always jumping so far ahead. Yeah. Right.
Stuff, and then you walk in and it's like Thanksgiving.
Yeah. Or Christmas. Like half the time they skip Thanksgiving altogether, right? Yeah. It was Lowe's that we went into to get. We went in to get something and everything was like artificial trees and Christmas. And I felt like it was like to my kids, I'm like, just look straight. Don't look at it. Don't look at it. Oh, anyway. All right. Well, let's jump back into this and then we'll go from there. Right. So we talked about these last time, 3 main eating disorders, kind of 2 main ones, and then the smaller one that we talked about. So anorexia, starving yourself, restricted eating, underweight. Talked about bulimia, that binge purge cycle, where you're eating large amounts of food and then compensating in some way so that you don't gain weight from it. And then binge eating disorder, where you eat until you're uncomfortably full, but you don't purge, so oftentimes gain weight. Right. And then we talked about all these different risk factors that can add up to give somebody like a higher likelihood of getting an eating disorder. I was telling my daughter, Kaya, I was telling her that I told the story about Addison in my class, and she's like, she's still a bully. And I'm like, well, someone should take her out. Right? Like, again, I'm gonna get in trouble one day over this kid, but not yet. We'll see what happens. But the last piece of this chapter is kind of how do we treat anorexia? How do we treat bulimia? And then I have some suggestions for like further like watching or reading if you're interested in more. And the goals for treating anorexia and bulimia are a little bit different because they present differently. So we have to tackle them a little bit differently. With anorexia, the first thing you need to do is get somebody back to a healthy weight. Now, this is not easy to do. If somebody has a disorder where they're by definition not eating, they're refusing to maintain a normal weight, it can be very challenging to get them back up to the proper weight, right? Or just a weight where it's no longer dangerous. So when you're really underweight, it has a lot of like health effects. People's hair can fall out, their nails and bones become brittle, right? Women stop having menstrual cycles. There's all these different like things that happen. And so goal number one is to get somebody up in their weight a little bit. And this might be force feeding. Sometimes if things are really dire, it might be putting in like a tube where you like make sure that food is getting into their system in a different way, in a more controlled way. This could be done in a facility or it could be done at home on like an outpatient basis, but you're trying to get somebody back to like a healthier point. And then the key from there is to try and treat whatever is the underlying issue. So we talked about all those different causes. If the causes are something like related to conditioning, then we work on that. If it's something related to self-esteem or lack of control or a mood disorder or anxiety, then we work on that. Right, so it's trying to figure out what is the underlying cause of the eating disorder so we can tackle it. And that might be done through therapy. It could could be done a little bit through medication. It depends, right? It depends on whatever the underlying issue is. And then we need to eliminate or reduce any of the behaviors that might cause relapse. So is it certain people that you hang out with that might trigger you to relapse? Is it certain times of the day? Is it certain foods, times of the year? What are the triggers for you? If we can identify the triggers, then maybe we can come up with a game plan to reduce them or ideally eliminate them, but that's not always possible. So kind of a three-prong effort, right, of trying to help somebody. And this is a very ongoing and difficult process, right? As we talked about, like you have to eat to survive and you're hungry all the time. And so these are things that are constantly coming up for somebody. So it can be a very long and kind of difficult process to treat. Teaching people healthier habits is kind of the core of it. With bulimia, a little bit different, but some of the same ideas. With this one, we have to break the cycle. And so we have to break that binge purge cycle in order to help somebody get over this. And so it's aiming at teaching better eating habits, right? How do you recognize when you're full? How much food should you be eating or not eating, right? Kind of like looking at like typical and good eating habits. And there's a lot of therapies that go with this. Group therapy is really, really helpful for eating disorders. And a big reason for that is people get to share their stories. They have a sense of like normalizing their behavior. They feel like I'm not alone, right? Like if somebody else in the group is like, I ate this last night and I didn't throw it up, I held on to it. Everyone in that group knows how profound that is. So oftentimes group therapy or like residential treatment centers can be big for treating eating disorders, kind of getting someone out of their environment and into a different environment where we can help them. It might be some behavioral therapy. Journaling is really common here, right? I want you to journal. What did you eat? How did you feel after you ate it, right? What did you want to do? What did you do after you ate all that food? Right, so kind of looking at patterns and journaling is a really big focus. If the underlying issue is maybe like a mood disorder or anxiety, let's consider medication to try and address that. And what we see is that treatment is effective, but a lot of people relapse. And again, for the reasons we talked about, right? It's because food and like eating come up so frequently. We see an incredible amount of relapse with eating disorders. But the more that we can identify the underlying cause, the more that we can kind of reduce those triggers, the better that we tend to do. So it's a lot of kind of tackling things on a dimensional front, which makes sense because it's caused by a bunch of different things. So slightly different goals, but kind of a similar thought. And then, as I mentioned, I have some like books and documentaries that I think are really like popular and interesting. There's a couple of books that I put up here that are all like very quick reads, but they're great like accounts of people who have struggled with an eating disorder. And then documentaries, I showed you part of Thin, To the Bone is probably the most recent one. It was on Netflix. Not sure if it still is or not, but it was on Netflix. And so these are some things that might be helpful if you want to know more, if you want to watch something or read something related to this topic. And then I do have, as I mentioned, a little like case study that I want to do. And this is somebody's like true accounts, right? So this is somebody's account of their struggle with an eating disorder. And what I have on here is it's like a page and like a paragraph of their account. And then afterward, there are 4 questions. What are your reactions? What are some of the signs or symptoms that this person has an eating disorder? What do you think might have influenced it, so causes? And then what are some options for treatment? So what I'll do is I'll give you each one, but I think you should work on it in groups, so read it on your own. And then find a couple of people around you and you can work on it together. You can turn one sheet in together, that would totally be fine. But let me give you all your own so that you can read it. So read through it and then pair it up with a couple of people. Every single time I pass out papers, I think of my fifth grade teacher. I don't think she liked me. She gave me a U, like unsatisfactory, and then wrote on my report card that I couldn't pass out papers. That was like 35 years ago, and I still think about it every single time I pass out papers, right? Speaking of the power of other people and the things they say, right? So every time they stick together and it takes too long, I'm like, Mrs. Scarface, that was her name, and she made fun of me, Mrs. Scarface.
How do you pass out papers?
I don't know, right? But I don't think I had short hair, she was like super conservative, I don't think she liked me, but yeah, I got a U in paper passing, or whatever. Again, all these years later, I still think about it. Anyway, I'll be quiet now, read through that, and then find a couple of people to work on it with. And again, once you finish reading it, find a couple of people around you and you can turn one in together, but definitely work on it together. I think it makes it a little easier to do.
Yeah. Yeah. Of course.
I already read it.
What are your reactions? Pretty. This guy I read that. That went through.
Sad that someone. You wanna join us?
No, we have a game today. So.
Oh, nice, are you done?
Yeah, oh, this is wrong. I
Oh.
was like, I'm not like. Yeah. I want to stop it, you know, like, man, it's like, I don't have to go for that, and I'm like, like, that's not like, I would believe, but I'm like, it's going between two different, like, spectrums, I guess, like.
Oh, sorry.
Yeah.
Everybody, didn't see anybody anymore.
Yeah.
That's why, like, I don't know if I'm.
I just gotta say, like, that's why I saw that. Stop myself, no. That's what. Like, and the sounds good, shit, like, just. Find a happy medium, if that makes sense.
That's really hard for me to read all of this because I experienced like most of what happens in the story in real life in my life. So it's like in elementary school. It's so hard. So even like the stories of like I think this should be like it's children. Yeah.
Always had. Always. I'm switching the.
Besides what holds me.
Stop eating certain
This year.
bread. Eating moderate.
That's just sort of like.
Well, she's like.
Because the end of the year and then everybody's.
I mean, as a kid, it's. I want to say easier, but like, at least bad ignorance, like. I'm not. Like, when you're older, it's like, it's a little more harder. Well, not like harder, but like.
Because when you're young, you're gonna have to be so flexible, so
Yeah.
it's easier to use and stay that way, but it's more dangerous. Yes. It's nice that the parents were encouraging, you know, they care enough to actually. Yeah. I don't think they.
Not seeing this.
I mean, I'm glad that parents noticed and saw it as a thing, because like, I think that there's a lot of situations where parents who see their kids lose that much weight and praise them for it. And encourage them to do it more, even though like it's obviously unhealthy, they're, because like, especially with like a young girl, they're being so hurt to be thin, they're even, oh, they're gonna fit in more.
I never.
I don't really like the mom.
Have like chicken somewhere, so fried.
Somewhere.
So very.
I can write you guys comments, right?
That's what fun you love.
I can write you guys comments, right?
That seems fair.
It was easy for work because they didn't have school. Now they have school. Yeah.
I think for the world, it's a couple of kind of relates to, always in a way. Went for legislation. So.
Back to the beginning of the world, we don't do it.
And also you can kind of say that. There's some kind of weird that was kind of like worried that like seeing model matters, so like changes in behavior.
It's so weird that the door does that. Does it bother anyone else? Is it just me? Every time it does that, I'm.
Don't you know it's Billy's trying to walk in for Halloween? It's like,
Oh, jeez. Don't say that.
Yeah. My mom, she's full.
what's a good example?
The very end, she's working on animals, so the just they all I love at the end.
I'll be honest.
That's my story. So, we had a new class. I mean, definitely.
It's just the mom. We don't need to.
Like,
Let's take a few more minutes and I'll try to get all your thoughts down and we'll talk about it together. A few more minutes.
No, at least to Christmas, it says to 11 to 5, from summer to Christmas.
That's just really good. That's very hard. It's always been, right? But I mean, when the being is, it's so. That's crazy. I did it. I had a terrible class. I had
Yeah. That's the first and last name. Yeah, make sure you put your first and last names on there, you're gonna, so you can get credit for it, okay, first and last name. Okay.
So then. And then obviously. Maybe, you know, nobody knows me, I could think I was starting to maintain it. I'm not sure. Yeah, totally. Yeah.
Wait, so what for the treatment? Was she, is she still in the university? Would you never start doing? She's going to her. So, yeah, and I don't know, she just like,
Maybe like, your. Yeah. It's like, it's gonna have like.
It's like another minute and a half. At 9.
It's so hard because if you want to say, like, it's not that.
So I say,
I can't
I mean, that.
I just look at food and I gain weight. Yeah. Yeah.
Like she can acknowledge that she knows, like, yeah, it's like, but she don't can't say, so I like all this saying, oh, now like, she's about like.
Yeah.
It's better, like, that's not really, like, but it's not like,
Yeah.
like, she knows she.
Oh my gosh, I love crumble cookies, but they're so bad. For one cookie. I know. We were standing in there waiting for our cookie order and I was looking, they had it up and it was like, you know, it's ridiculous. I mean, they're delicious, but
But I have a question.
yeah.
You think society is we're saving the second. Why is it that kids so bad?
We could also say like group therapy
Or
or
so
slide set, that's maybe.
judgmental, they harass other kids that want to serve them
Yeah.
when they're just kids.
Yeah.
Why does it start off so,
Parents.
why does it start off so young?
It does. You missed the story last time, like I was telling you, my kindergarten. Back in kindergarten.
Your daughter, you.
Yeah, my daughter, like bullied for her food choices in week by another kindergarten, you know, like it starts really early. A lot of it comes from parents and their family.
When you're a kid, you're a mirror until you see it.
Yeah, right. It's just crazy to think it starts so young, right?
It's like a weird thing, because when you get older. Nobody.
Especially when you're way older, and then.
Thanks.
Definitely.
Right? At that point, might as well enjoy it.
Yeah.
Enjoy it.
Why?
No, no.
I feel like that's.
Oh, we're gonna talk about it then. I mean, I think it's just you see how impressionable people are and those messages that they're getting and It just starts early, like everything like that, like pressure on other people.
I feel like it's the kids that really are the kids that get to do this, like.
Yeah.
Okay, it's only gonna know that is bad if they're.
Right, yeah, it comes from that family.
Yeah,
first,
so I think
right?
it's definitely that.
Yeah,
But you don't think considering that it's so harmful for another kid, to other kids so early on, that to learn about this.
Yeah.
In elementary school should be a requirement to show it again.
it would be nice, yeah. And they talk more and more about bullying now in school, way more than it was in the past, like bullying is covered constantly. Right, it's a really big, like, discussion now, which it wasn't when I was a kid, it wasn't like even the generation like before this one. But I think that there are more and more conversations about bullying, and the effects of bullying, right? And I think it's getting better and better, but it's slow, right? And it depends on like how someone is raised, right? If they're not raised to be sensitive to other people or mindful to other people, then it goes out there. Kids are really good at projecting whatever has happened to them onto other people. Right, so if they're getting those messages at home, it makes sense that they give them to other people. They might not understand them for themselves, so they project them onto others. It's definitely an issue, right? It's a big
It's
issue.
at least some of them, not all of them.
Not all of them, no. All right, how was it? You okay?
Conversations.
Yeah. All right. All right, so let's talk about this together. What are some of the signs that you would say she has an eating disorder? What are some of the things you wrote down for number 2? Give me one. What's one thing that you wrote down that was like a red flag for you? Yeah.
Right.
Yeah, right. She's definitely over exercising. What else? What else could we say about her? Yeah.
Purging.
Yeah, okay. So purging, right? So over exercising and purging, those are both very like compensatory behaviors that we talked about. What else? What else would we lining myself? What else would we say? Yeah. Okay, right, so kind of being in denial about it, for sure. What else? There's definitely a few other ones that we could say, yeah. Yeah, right, she loses a lot of weight, right, like she definitely drops quite a bit in size and weight over the course of this case study. Anything else that we could put down? What about her eating? Like her eating patterns, other than the compensatory stuff, was she, anything we want to add about that? Yeah. Yeah. Yeah, it's very malnourished, she's not eating a lot. I heard somebody say where she's hungry, like there's a point where she cries because she's so hungry. And then it hits a point where she's no longer hungry. And that happens sometimes for people who have eating disorders. If you've been starving yourself enough, it's almost like your body gives up on those like cues to you because they're not going anywhere. People can actually hit a point where they aren't feeling those cues of hunger, or they're so oblivious to them that it's almost just not a conscious experience. I have one other thing on here. Anyone else have anything else? Anything else about her like symptoms or stuff you're worried about? Yeah. Yeah.
So she's not actually talk
Sure. Yeah, right. So she's having all sorts of like physical issues as a result. I also put that she had a very distorted image of herself. Remember, that's kind of key with both of them, that people don't see themselves accurate, right? You see yourself as heavier than you actually are, or kind of in a distorted sort of way. If you had to pick between the 3 that we talked about, if you had to pick between anorexia, bulimia, and binge eating disorder, where would you vote for her? I don't think this one is quite clear. Like, it's not crystal clear. It's not like easily identifiable. What would you pick? Yeah. Right. Mhm.
But when she recovered and she's came back.
Yeah.
She has an
Mhm. Yeah, yeah, and I think you're right on that, right? She starts out with a very clear presentation of anorexia, not eating, ignoring the fact that she's hungry, really restrictive, over exercising. But then it evolves, and this happens for people, right? So she kind of got treatment, got better, and then starting with, not that one, right? Starting with anorexia, but then she kind of transitions into bulimia toward the end. And this is definitely something that you can see. We tend to talk about these disorders as separate entities, but oftentimes within categories, people can kind of like go back and forth or blend them. And she definitely does some blending. And as we talked about last time, in every category, there's a NOS, right? Which means not otherwise specified, right? And so with this disorder, like, or with this case study, she might have like an eating disorder not otherwise specified, right? Or maybe we diagnose her with anorexia and then later with bulimia. You can have both, right? But it would typically, if someone had both, we'd say they have not otherwise specified. That happens in every category of disorders. So what are some things that you think might have influenced her? For number 3, what are some of the things that you put down that might have contributed? Yeah.
It's going shopping.
Yeah, okay, so going shopping, right? And when she can fit into the sizes that they have in the store, that's really reinforcing for her, right? That's positive reinforcement. I've lost weight now, I fit into these clothes, I can wear all these clothes, they have them available, only reinforcing it, right? Conditioning is huge. What else can we say about her? Yeah.
IMCA instructor.
Yeah, yeah, right. And the things that people say to us, I just shared with you just a minute ago, right? That like all the way back in 5th grade, I'm 43. 5th grade, what was that? Like 10? Was 10. My kids are in 5th grade, they're 10, right? So 33 years ago, and someone said something to me and I still hold on to it, right? And so the things that instructors or like peers or parents or teachers, whoever, like say to you, can definitely play a role. And I think that YMCA instructor didn't help her at all. Anything else that we can add here? What else can we say might have influenced? Yeah.
Models in the magazine.
Yeah, right. So the models that she sees in the magazines, those beauty norms. Yeah, right. And that's a big one. And we talked about that last time, right? That how you're supposed to look and what's attractive, right? That definitely plays a role. Anything else that you have written down? Anything else you want to add? Yeah. Yeah. Right, like we were talking about bullying, right? Like the bullying played a big role for her. And it does for a lot of people, right? So again, just like with what we covered, that it's kind of this multi-dimensional risk perspective, she's got a bunch of them. You know, she's got some of those interpersonal factors and cultural factors and then some of the like OCD kind of related stuff that she has going on would be a psychological factor. So there's a lot of different factors contributing. And those are all things that we would need to target in treatment, which is the next one, right? So what are some things that we could do to help her? Like, how could we help this individual? Like, she gets some help, so you can use those too. But what are things that we could do to support her? Any thoughts about how we could help? Number 4? Yeah, or questions? Sure.
So she mentioned that she tried different combos of pills for years,
Sure.
but I'm not sure what kind of medicine can give to them, like what do you
Yeah.
do? Start, because I'm hungry, she's not feeling hungry.
So I would assume, and again, we don't have all the information yet, which is always frustrating with case studies, like I want more. But I would assume what they were trying to do is treat the underlying conditions. So medications might be like antidepressants or something for anxiety to treat the OCD. Right, so those medications would probably be what she's talking about, because there isn't necessarily a medication that's going to make her eat or like make her have her hunger again. It would be treating those underlying things that are contributing to the eating disorder that they would be targeting. So I would assume that's what they're talking about, would be those kind of things. And so medication could obviously be one, right? Like trying to help her that way. Maybe they didn't find the right one or kind of getting back to that. Yeah. Therapy, right? For sure, therapy. And again, never an easy, like magical cure-all, but therapy could help her kind of get at some of the thoughts and examine them and hopefully change them. Give her that support, maybe work through some of that bullying that she went through when she was younger, through things like EMDR, which we talked about, or just kind of talk therapy, right? I think all those things would help. Yeah. Sure.
She worked through it. She came back.
Mm-hmm.
Scary.
Yeah.
So she taught therapy and therapy.
Yeah, and I love that idea, and that's really common for eating disorders, as we talked about a few minutes ago, that removing someone from their environment into a controlled environment where she could have, you know, very kind of frequent therapy, it would be every day, sometimes more than once a day, and a different environment, that might be really helpful for her to get her kind of reset in a sense. So again, this is kind of a true story. This was somebody's personal account, which I thought was really powerful. And I have a kind of similar one that we'll do with substance disorders next week. So if you want to make sure your first and last name is on whichever one you're turning in. And if you want to pass those forward, I'll come around and grab them before we move on. Oh, I'm like, I'll take it. All right, thank you. Oh, there they are. I'm like, there's no names on this one. I get to guess. I don't know your handwriting. All right, anybody else? Do I have? Thank you. All right. So we'll say goodbye to eating disorders. Again, I had some recommendations for you. Any last comments, questions, thoughts, stories, anything else with these before we move on? Anything else at all? Okay. So where we'll go from here, and we'll just kind of start this a little bit today and then continue it next time, are substance disorders. And there's really only 2 disorders in this category, but they are ones that affect a lot of people, right? And so that's something that we'll get into. We'll talk a little bit about what are psychoactive drugs and the different categories, just a tiny bit. That's not the focus of this class, but then we'll get into the substance disorders, what happens when you combine substances, which is really dangerous, and then some causes and treatments. So that's kind of the focus of chapter 10. And when we talk about drugs, this is an absolutely massive category, right? Any kind of psychoactive substance, this is a substance that changes your mood or your perception. So this is everything from Tylenol to caffeine, right? To really mild things like energy drinks and caffeine and things like that, to PCP, ecstasy, LSD, marijuana, antidepressants, anti-anxiety medications, any substance that you put into your system that's going to alter your mood, alter your perception, change your chemistry is considered a psychoactive drug. So this is everything from legal to illegal, prescribed to purchased to everything in between, an absolutely massive group of substances. And as long as we have documented history, we have evidence of people using substances to alter their consciousness. As we go back and look throughout time and throughout documentation, people have used substances for years, right? Like alcohol was a gift to the gods in ancient Greek cultures. Saw a lot of Native American cultures and indigenous tribes using substances to alter spiritual journeys, right? This is something that has been around for a very long time. And in our culture, right, it tends to be something that is a big problem, right? A lot of different substances. And when people take a drug, whether it's legal or illegal or purchased or prescribed or some combination of the two, drugs cause temporary changes in your behavior, your emotions, and your thoughts. They affect your chemistry. And I have a little video kind of showing you how that happens, but they can also cause long-term changes. So when people use a substance every now and then, and it's not affecting their life, it's not necessarily a problem. Could it become a problem? Definitely, right? I have a cup of coffee every single morning, right? Every morning. I wouldn't say it's a problem, right? I don't spend a bunch of money that I don't have on it. I probably spend more money than I should on it, but it's not affecting me financially. It's not interfering with my life in some way. Though I will say that if I don't have my cup of coffee one morning, I feel lousy. I have a headache and I'm tired and it's harder to wake up, right? Could that escalate to a problem? Sure. Has it become one for me? No, right? So substances are something that people can use periodically without an issue, but it can become one if it starts to interfere with your life or your responsibilities, your finances, right? A whole host of other things. So when people have long-term changes or problems with a substance, that's when we consider it a disorder. So a lot of people can use a substance every now and then and be fine, but for some people, just once and it's enough to get them hooked and be a problem. What's so tricky about substances is we all react differently to them. Every single person has a different reaction to caffeine. My partner can literally drink a cup of coffee in bed and fall asleep. Like, I can't. If I have coffee after like 2 in the afternoon, I'm up all night. Like, forget it. She can be in bed drinking coffee and like half asleep. I can't do that, right? We react differently to something as benign as coffee. I can't take NyQuil. NyQuil makes me so loopy, I sleepwalk. It's ridiculous. I have woken up in random places if I take NyQuil. I know better than to take NyQuil, right? I once took it and wandered out of my house, right? And so I don't take NyQuil anymore, right? It's just, I can't tolerate it. And that's something that is totally like, I could go to Target and purchase it right now. It's not a controlled substance, but you take enough of it, it could be a problem, right? And again, everyone reacts differently to even benign things. Yeah. Mhm. Yeah. Mhm. Yeah. Oh, so kind of going back to our last chapter, right? But again, substances, right? And so like there are some medications that like typically a drug is only going to kind of see a short-term solution, but it might kickstart, right? Somebody's treatment. So yeah.
How long have you been drinking coffee consistently?
Oh my gosh, maybe my whole adult life, right? I think in my first cup of coffee I ever had, I was 18, right? Which is crazy. Like my family didn't drink coffee.
Just from there.
And from there on, right? I worked at Starbucks all the way through my master's degree. And I think ever since then, I was hooked, right?
You don't think you like built any immunity to caffeine?
I mean, 1 cup of coffee still like makes me feel awake. I haven't built a tolerance to it, right? It would be the word where like it no longer has the same effect. No, I don't think I have over time, but some people build tolerance very quickly, where something that worked for you every day no longer works, and now you need 2 or 3 or 4 to get the same effect. And that's where it starts to become a problem for people when they have to keep upping their dose in order to get the same effect.
That's how it was with me with energy drinks.
Yeah.
Then I had to just stop because I need like 3 to actually
Right?
lock it.
Yeah, and that's a great example of tolerance, right? Like, and that happens, right? If I have an energy drink in the afternoon to help me wake up, then the next day in the afternoon, I feel like I need that in order to wake up. And then you get into this habit of like, I've had it every day. And sometimes that can lead to, oh, okay, now I need 2, or now I need 3, or it's no longer working, I need something else. That's where it becomes a problem. So I've been lucky that it hasn't affected me, but a lot of people who drink coffee or use something every day do build up tolerance to it at some point. It's very common. Did you have a?
Yeah, my mom and me is the same way with coffee.
Yeah,
I can drink coffee, my mom can drink so much coffee and it doesn't do anything.
yeah,
She's always tired, so.
right, yeah. And that's how it, like, it's wild to think our chemistry can be so different, right? You would think caffeine would affect people very similarly, but it doesn't. Even something as mild and easily accessible as caffeine can have wildly different approaches. Some people are calmed down by caffeine. Typically, that's people who have things like ADHD for the most part. Like it's sometimes even diagnostic in an informal way. That when someone takes a stimulant and it calms them down, it's often an indicator of like ADHD. That
I was gonna say that I feel that I'm really sensitive to complaining.
Yeah.
I'm really anxious, like I feel my heart.
Sure. Yeah, and some people hate the effect of caffeine. It makes them feel like they're having a panic attack. It increases anxiety, right? And so if you struggle with anxiety naturally, sometimes caffeine can launch you into what feels like a panic attack. And it's uncomfortable, right? It's an uncomfortable feeling, yeah. Every drug, right? And so what's tricky about that is like, because of our transfers.
You know, like, for me, when I drink coffee.
Yeah.
Sometimes I drink caffeine and most of the way to kind of max out energy.
Sure.
And you think I'm drunk. But then other times I drink caffeine, and I'm not ready for it.
Yeah, and it could be like what you eat in that day, right? What's in your stomach, right? What's in your system can affect the effect of the drug on your body. It could be the type of coffee that you have, like every type of coffee has a different strength to it or a different intensity to it. And I think that's one way I've avoided tolerance is I drink different coffee from different places and they all affect me differently. Like if I have a cup of coffee I brew at home, it doesn't affect me nearly as much as if I have like a cold brew from Starbucks, right? Or if I have then a drink from Coffee Bean, right? Like they're all like different in the way that they're brewed and their intensity. And then what's in your system or not in your system can also play a big role. So if you have a full stomach versus not, all of those things can shape how you react to a substance, even something as mild as caffeine. Yeah,
I'm like your Wi-Fi literally drink like 5 cups and I'm like,
yeah.
like falling asleep.
Same.
I think it's interesting because I think we're always jealous of the opposite, right? Because I'm jealous of my partner. She'll be in bed, like drinking a warm cup of coffee. And I'm like, I want some coffee, but I can't. And she's all like, well, I want to wake up when I drink coffee. And so like, I think it's always, we want what we don't have, right? Because if it was the other way around, I wonder if you'd feel the same way, but we've had this conversation so many times because I always make her coffee at night and I'm so jealous of it. And she's like, well, I'm jealous that you can wake up in the morning with coffee because I can't. Right, so I don't know which is better. Yeah. Yeah, and maybe some of that's cultural too. My partner is definitely from like a Hispanic family. Right? So I have a little video. It talks a little bit about how drugs affect your body, which is something that we're talking about right now. It was just a video I found on YouTube, but I'm kind of talking about some of the not only like illicit drugs or illegal drugs that we're going to talk about very briefly, but also some of the prescribed ones like antidepressants and so on. They all affect your system, right? And so they're causing changes in your neurotransmitters and the hormones in your body that can lead to a temporary change or kind of a long-term problematic pattern. And so they're rewiring you in a sense. And if you use a drug for a very long period of time, it can alter your chemistry kind of in the long run. And I'm not going to go into these, but I did want to give you some examples. We tend to talk about like 3 main categories of drugs, depressants, stimulants, and hallucinogens. Now, almost rarely do they fit super cleanly and neatly into a category. Like, for example, marijuana is one that can go here. It can also, it's typically categorized as a hallucinogen, but it's kind of an atypical drug in that way. But in general, depressants are drugs that slow you down. They depress or slow down your system. They make it where you don't think as clearly. They slow you down. They make you tired, make you groggy, maybe relaxed on some level. Common depressants are alcohol, right? And even though alcohol might have kind of a stimulating effect at first, ultimately it does tend to make you tired and slow down and depress your system. Sedative hypnotic drugs like the barbiturates and benzodiazepines, Xanax, Valium, drugs that are often used for anxiety to help calm you down. And then the opioids like morphine, heroin, and your body's natural endorphins, all of these are drugs that tend to depress or slow down your system. And again, we're not going into them because it's kind of outside the focus of this. But if you want to know more about how drugs do affect your system, you can always take our like neuropsych class is a good one to take where they go into this a little bit more. But depressants slow you down. Stimulants speed you up. They stimulate your system. Right? They create feelings of optimism and energy and make it hard for you to sleep. You feel like up and stimulated. A lot of different stimulants, right? Cocaine, amphetamines, which are often like pills or medications that people would take, ecstasy, nicotine, caffeine, energy drinks obviously would fall into here as they have quite a bit of like caffeine and then also a lot of like supplements and herbs in them to augment the caffeine. But a lot of stimulants, and stimulants tend to be very addictive because they work very quickly. They tend to increase your activity and your alertness in a very fast way. And then you have a withdrawal from them. So people keep taking them to avoid the withdrawal. So they tend to be some of the more addicting drugs that are out there. And then finally, hallucinogens are drugs that distort your visual and auditory perception. So they kind of create sensory experiences that aren't naturally there. And these are drugs like LSD. Ketamine would fall into this as well. We talked about that a little bit in the mood unit. And then marijuana falls here. But it's interesting because it could also be viewed as a depressant or a stimulant depending on the strain of it. So lots of different like strains of marijuana, and depending on which one you're taking, it could have different effects. But we tend to put it here. It's the most frequently used illegal drug in the United States, very commonly used and abused. But lots of different categories of drugs. And again, people can use a lot of these every now and then and be all right. But when it becomes like a long-term problematic pattern, that's when it escalates into a disorder. And that's what we're gonna focus on, are the two disorders that can come when you use these in kind of a problematic way. Yeah.
Do you have a good explanation on like why alcohol is legal, other than like people just need like something to be legal, so.
Sure. So alcohol and nicotine have really strong like political and cultural roots. And I think that's a big part of why they are legal, especially nicotine. Nicotine, which is the active ingredient in tobacco and cigarettes, right? Nicotine is more dangerous than marijuana, right? It's more addictive. It causes cancer at a higher rate. It is so much more problematic. I think if marijuana and nicotine were discovered today, like brand new, had never been seen before, it would be switched in which one was legal versus illegal. But it has strong political and money roots. So when nicotine was discovered, it was a huge money maker. And so it became very like politically entrenched, making it legalized. Same with alcohol, right? So it's not always just the drug itself. It's kind of the context in which it was discovered, the popularity of it, the money of it, right? And a lot of legislation around marijuana also leads back to money, right? By making it legal, you can tax it, you get income and revenue from it. So it's more complicated than the drug itself.
That's the reason why they just said, "Okay, just legalize marijuana, because
Yeah,
it makes us money and it's not like the worst thing out there, basically.
that's a big motivation behind it, right? The money was huge, right? It was this huge source of revenue and income that wasn't being tapped into. And so by making it legal, you get a lot of money from it. The states can tax it, they can get that money and income. But again, it's really fascinating. There's a whole book, forgetting the name of the book. I read this long book about the differences between marijuana and nicotine. And like, it's really like, if they were discovered now, I would bet anything would be flipped, because marijuana is way less dangerous than nicotine. Was that a?
Oh, yeah. So no, I was gonna add into tobacco, because I remember like, so a Family Guy where, Lewis, works at like a board of director, I think, at a tobacco company, and like she goes to Congress to like typical like political like support us kind of thing, and then like at the very end she's like, wait, this is kind of bad.
Yeah, and nicotine is a dangerous substance. It reaches your bloodstream and takes effect in less than 7 seconds, which is why smoking cigarettes is so incredibly addictive, right? Because it has this really fast, instant stimulating effect. Versus other drugs can take a little bit longer, right? And I mean, marijuana is very readily available now. If you go back 10 years, it wasn't the case that it was so legal, but it changes. Our knowledge and like awareness of these things changes constantly, which leads to legislation and money, and it's all kind of interconnected. So there are two main disorders, and I think what I'll do, because I want to just touch base on those things, I'm going to stop here and we'll pick up with this on Monday. But I want to take a minute to talk about the two things that I wrote up on the board over here. Right, so we've been talking about this multiple times, but I want to remind you one last time, because it's due by tonight, and several of you have already turned this in, which is fantastic. But your second part of the paper is due by tonight at 11:59 p.m. I remember it's worth 40 points, so you definitely want to get this in. If you miss the deadline, remember that I do accept these parts of the paper late at 10% off each day. So it's 4 points each day, but turning it into me tomorrow or the next day is way better than a 0. So please like still turn it in even if it's late. But this is due by tonight. It's an outline and source, 2 to 3 pages, progress toward that final paper. Big thing, remember you have to have an academic source, and you should be giving me that citation. It's the first thing I'm going to check for. And I'm telling you that like really transparently. When I open your paper, I'm going to go straight to see if you have a source and citation. If you don't, you lose those points. So please make sure that you have a source with a citation, and that it's an academic source, like a journal article, a textbook, other than ours, or the DSM, or it could be a book that you found in the library. But make sure that you have that source with 10 points. Okay, if you give me something like Wikipedia or a non-academic source, you'll get partial credit. You can use one of those sources, but make sure you have an academic one as well. Are there any other questions about that part of the paper while we have a minute? Are there any anything you're unclear about or questions? Couple people emailed me and asked if you could still change your character. Definitely, right? You can change your character at any point, but I would do it before you write part 2. Right? Once you've written this, you have 2 to 3 pages of progress. It would be a shame to start over, but you're welcome to if you would like. The other thing, if you're looking at your calendar, and I hate to put both up at the same time, but just to keep it on your mind, 1 week from today is our second exam. So I'll see you Monday and we'll finish up chapter 10. And then Wednesday is exam number 2. Okay, and you have a study guide on Canvas. We won't meet in person because you'll be taking the exam online. And you can take it during this time, or you can take it later in the day if you'd rather sleep in, that's totally fine. But our second exam is on Wednesday, and it's just on this unit. So it's on everything since the last test, chapters 8, 6, 7, 9, and 10. Okay, and you have the study guide on Canvas with everything you need to know. And we can talk more about that on Monday, but I just want to put it on your mind as we go into the weekend, so you can start preparing, studying, or doing whatever you need. Okay? Yeah.
Sources to like, back up like the disorders I found on maybe.
Yeah. Yeah, which is why the DSM might be really helpful for you, because the DSM is going to go over the diagnostic criteria for the disorder you think your character has. And so that's where you're going to get that. You're going to have to get it from somewhere, right? And so maybe the DSM or an article or a book. And then you have to talk about causes and treatments. And so that might also be coming from a book or a website that you found that could be helpful too. And your character might receive some treatments or things in the show. And you can talk about that or what you might have done differently. Sometimes the characters don't make it, right? What would you have done if they were still alive? You could talk about that as well. But that's what the source is for. It's going to help you. And you only need one. You can have more than one, but you only need one source. And if you want to use more than one, you can. You only need one, as long as it's academic. And remember, I did post a video from our library on our Canvas page. If you scroll all the way down, you can find it under modules. And it goes over how to find academic sources, how to use our library webpage. There's some handouts on there on how to cite the DSM. So if you're using the DSM, I have a handout that gives you the exact citation. You can just copy and paste it into your paper. So make sure you look at all those resources I posted for you on Canvas. They're going to help with the paper. Okay. Anything else for now? About the paper, the exam, any of that? I hope you have a wonderful weekend. We'll pick up with this on Monday. Don't forget about the paper, and I'll see you next week.